Welcome, Dr. Martin.
Thank you.
So we're gonna kind of start off a little bit with a little bit of your background as far as like you being a doctor, you've been a reverend, a pastor. So
Okay.
just kind of give us like a brief history of you.
All right. Well, like you said, my name is Kathi Martin. I go by either Dr. Martin or Reverend Dr. Kathi Martin, or just Kathi if you have food or money. I am a ordained minister. I've been a minister for 25 years, or well, actually, I have more than that, but I've been ordained for 25 years. And I'm also a certified life coach, and I'm also a certified project manager. So I have a bit of a mixed background.
Yeah.
I've spent like the past 25 years or so being bivocational, doing both the heart stuff and the head stuff. So I've been a pastor and life coach for a number of years. Pastor, as I said, 25 years. I've been a project manager along with that through the whole time. So yeah, I kind of believe in people being at their best when we work together. And so that's why I get to take that philosophy in the church, and I have that philosophy in the corporations. So that's what I've been up to. I am married. I have a spouse and a 15-year-old. I can't believe she's 15.
Oh, wow.
15-year-old and a little four-legged friend that we have around the house as well.
Oh, so you're busy.
Yeah, I got a lot going on. That's pretty much all I can tell you about me. I like art. I like music. I like people.
Okay. So it just kind of seems like you wear multiple hats. Like you just kind of like all over the place.
Yeah, and I've been that way my whole career.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my entire career.
And that's a good thing though. Like that really is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't know if I can do just one thing, and but I'm going to try. I think I'm about to let a couple of things go and just focus on the people side of my head and not the technical side of my head. I'm about to go, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So to kind of dive into some things about your day to day as far as like helping couples when it comes to, you know, some of the situations that come up in relationships and that come up in marriage.
Okay.
So I know at certain points when you're talking to like some of the couples, some of the married people, there are some tougher things that you have to kind of, you know, talk to the couples about. Like, how do you, I guess, coach or advise the couples, especially long-term couples that's been married for like 5, 6 years, maybe 10 years, through some of those tougher issues? Like, what advice do you give your couples?
What sort of issue? Like something about like forgiveness or
Yeah.
like
So let's just say like couples having maybe like forgiveness, something that is like unforgiven.
Okay.
And working on the process of trying to forgive that person for what they did.
Okay. Yeah, forgiveness is one of the tough issues that comes up often in relationships, if not the main thing that comes up in relationships when couples meet with me. Because typically I don't get a call unless they've tried everything on their own and they feel like they need some help. But yeah, forgiveness is often it. You know, the thing with forgiveness is trying to get to the truth. You know, from a spiritual perspective, we're taught that we should forgive one another and, you know, just move on. But that's not always the case when it comes to couples in real life. Yeah, because, you know, we have to move on. You know, if the couple wants to be successful, if the couple wants to be together in the future, they have to find a way to move on, and that means they have to forgive. And forgiveness is tricky because you have to forgive yourself, you have to forgive your spouse, And then you both have to make a decision to move forward from there.
Yeah.
And because if you don't, just like forgiveness is toxic for an individual, it's also toxic for a relationship.
Yeah.
For an individual, it causes you to have high blood pressure, anxiety, and all kinds of things. The same thing when it comes to a couple, it causes pressure and it causes anxiety and it causes lack of trust. But when I deal with couples, what I do is try to get them to, first of all, look inside themselves and see if there's something they need to forgive in themselves. And then work together. First they have to usually it's some indiscretion, like somebody cheated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the first thing we have to do is get whoever is the offender to hold up to what happened, to actually admit what happened, and be willing to do the work of forgiveness. And it takes the other person to be willing to accept apologies and try to move from there. But both parties have to be committed to it, or else it's not going to work. So what I try to encourage the couples to do is, as I said, first of all, admit what happened. Secondly, admit the fact that it's going to take some work to try to move through this situation. And then try to understand what happened and why it happened, and figure out, is there something in our relationship that we need to work on, and that is a clear issue in this relationship. And it's difficult to try to get to the root of what that is. But it takes time. And that's what I always tell couples when it comes to forgiveness. This is something you have to be in for the long haul. The person who is the offender has to be able to apologize in a way that the other person can receive it. Because as you know, there are all kinds of ways to receive an apology. Some people just say, I'm sorry, and try to move on. Whereas the other person in the couple, I'm sorry means, okay, I'm sorry. Let me show you that I'm really sorry with my actions. So, we have to figure out how forgiveness works for that particular couple.
Yeah. So even with that, like a certain amount of patience has to be had.
Yes.
For that whole process too. And most times whenever I guess you talk about forgiveness and especially from a relationship standpoint, it's either one person or the other thinks that issue is gonna go away overnight, right? Like they think, okay, you should feel better in a month and we can just move on.
Yeah. So and it doesn't work that way.
You're right. It doesn't work that way. So even with that, do you encourage like either one party or the other to be like a little patient in that process also?
Yeah. When I talk about making sure the couple understands that it's going to take time, that's the main thing about that, is there has to be some patience actually on both sides. Because, as I said, usually it has to do with somebody cheating or something like that going on. And that person is going to take them time too, to be able to admit what's going on. Because we don't like to admit, if we think we've hurt somebody, or if we're trying to hide what happened. It takes time to get the truth out, first of all. And and then it takes patience on the other person, the person who's feeling offended. They have to be willing to say, I'm going to stay at the table. I'm going to work through this. I know it's going to take time. So yes, it's going to take patience, and yes, it's going to take forgiveness, and it's going to take, swallowing some things sometime, not going off every time something, because those sort of offenses will rise up and bite you every now and then.
You're right. You definitely right about that.
And so I try to help couples know that this might happen, and ask them to, have some sort of way that they identify when that feeling is coming up, and knowing when they need to walk away for a minute and when to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you were saying it right. Like that process of someone, I guess, taking ownership.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, I guess, I'm not sure if that's like pride or if that's like embarrassment. A person may not want to accept that ownership initially.
Mm-hmm.
And that through that process, that helps that other person forgive kind of quicker if you do accept that ownership, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it takes forever if you're trying to, work through forgiveness with someone who doesn't think that they need to be forgiven.
Yeah.
We like to think we're good people,
Yeah.
but sometimes we do things that don't really live up to that standard. And so we have to be able to admit to ourselves, okay, we did something. Because what happens is we justify our actions. And so we have to work through all of that. We have to get through the individual justifying their actions, and we have to get through them trying to avoid responsibility. And like, as you said, they have to take ownership, because if no one takes ownership of what happened in the couple, in the relationship, then there's no way to heal from it, because you're acting like nothing ever happened, and that's not true. There's no way in a healthy way for a couple to move on without somebody owning what happened, and without them openly working through the work of forgiveness.
Yeah. So even with that, I guess you kind of, I guess, touched on it a little bit. So trust issues, like when couples have trust issues, I guess that stem from, like you were saying, maybe infidelity or even previous trust issues, even before they even got married. The person actually had trust issues. Do you coach that person through that process in that same way if they have a particular trust issue?
Well, first of all, and you just kind of mentioned this, if a couple does not have trust going into a relationship, I try to have them think a couple times about whether or not they need to move forward in that relationship. Because trust, is foundational to a relationship. If we can't trust our partner, there's really no way that we can avoid conflict going forward. What ends up happening when we have a lack of trust? It's similar as to when we have a lack of communication, even when we have unforgiveness. Sometimes one of the partners in a couple ends up having to disappear. They're there physically, but emotionally, and they've left the room.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is learn to trust our partner. And trust is if it's not there, it's hard to build up. Yeah. And that's why, that's why I say to couples, I don't want to be known as the counselor or the pastor who says, y'all just don't need to be together, just go your separate ways. But I have tried to hint towards that many times. Because we know that if trust is not there at the foundation, and if we can't identify what the issues are that's causing us not to trust and then move forward from that, then there's no need for that couple to be together, because it will not be a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And you're right. Like trust is big, and like, I guess trust is big in every aspect of, even if you're like dating, even if you're just in a committed relationship, and even if you're just like married, you want to be able to trust the person that you're with.
But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you good.
But the other thing, though, when it comes to trust, is the person who is not trusting needs to take some time and examine themselves.
Yeah.
Each person in that couple needs to examine themselves. Because a lot of times we don't trust because of some historical baggage. It could be because of something we learned in our family. It could be we're carrying on to baggage from past relationships and projecting that onto our new partner. So that's the first step, is once we get past that, do you need to be together at all? Then we move on to, okay, let's do some self-examination and see what we're bringing into the relationship and how that might be affecting this trust issue. Because the majority of the times that I've counseled couples, it is that one person, if it's in the beginning, it is that one person has brought some baggage into the relationship, and that baggage is poisoning from the beginning. So if they want to move forward, that's the next step, take a look at yourself. And before you come back and say, there's a reason for me not to trust this person, because more times than not, it's something inside that we're bringing into the relationship.
Yeah. And again, I guess that would tie into what we were talking about earlier, which is like ownership, right? Like
Yep.
everybody will take ownership of specific issues that happen in relationships.
Yes. We bring
Yeah.
our history into our present relationship. Just
Yeah.
drag it all with us, and
Yeah.
that does.
Yeah. So even with like those particular issues that may happen in like relationships and in marriage, when you say like the word consistency, right? Like even through the process of learning how to forgive someone, learning how to rebuild trust, consistency is even more important when it comes to, you know, pretty much doing what you say what you mean. Because that helps that whole trust process too, is believability, like a person honestly knowing that you're going to do this at this point, right?
Right. I can respond to that in a couple of ways. There's like a high level way to look at that, and then there's the everyday way to look at that. So at a high level, we need to connect with our partners, our husbands, our wives. We need to be able to connect with that person in an honest way where we accept people for who they are right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So we accept them for who they are, but we also understand that if this person is a healthy person, they're going to grow and they're going to change along the way. People don't change the way that we want them to, they change the way that's right for them.
Yeah.
And so we need to love our partners enough to be able to walk with them and even encourage them through times of transition, evolution, and change. So that level of consistency, I mean, that's supposed to change because we're supposed to grow as individuals. But on the day-to-day stuff, if we say we're going to do something with our partner ought to be able to trust what we say.
Yeah.
And they ought to know that they can depend on us.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example from my own life.
Okay.
My spouse asked me to fix a scratch, a scratch on the side of a car door, and because I'd done it on my car before, and I kept putting it off. I was asked to do this like maybe 6 months ago. Yeah. And I kept not forgetting, but avoiding it. Even though I said I was going to do it, I didn't do it. And I kept saying, okay, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Yeah. But it wasn't until Monday this week that I finally said, the reason I haven't done it is I don't want to mess up your relatively new car.
Yeah.
And once I admitted, okay, this is why I'm not doing it. This is what happened. Then we were able to talk through it. You know, I was able to get beyond this fear, and I went in, you know, I should take out another job because I did such a good job on that car.
Yeah.
Once I was able to admit what was going on with me. So, you know, I was able to say, okay, you can still depend on me, but this is why you haven't been able to depend on me to this point. So what I'm trying to say is we should be able to keep our word, you know, do what we say, and, you know, just be able to be consistent. We should be able to do that. And if there's a reason why we can't, as a couple, we need to be able to communicate to the point that we can say, okay, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. This is when I might need an adjustment to what I said I could do. But we need to be able to feel good enough about our partner to be open and honest and, you know, do what we say we're going to do. But if we need a revision, go ahead and say, this is a revision I need and why.
Yeah. No, and then you're right. Yeah, you're definitely right about that. So even with that, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit too, having great communication, right? Having great two-way communication is vitally important when it comes to like I guess the needs, the wants, the desires that happen in relationships and marriage. So if you don't have those skills, I guess you're left with assumptions, and assumptions don't really have a place in relationships. Like assuming that you know what a person thinks is
Yes.
not always the best course of action. So when it comes to encouraging good communication between couples, like what is your advice that you give like the couples that are working on communication?
Um, for couples that are having issues with communication, like you said, um, we shouldn't make assumptions. You know, we shouldn't assume that our partner knows what we mean. We come from different backgrounds. We're different people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we need to be able to say what's on our mind, and we need to be able to say what we need. We need to be able to say what our concerns are. But more importantly, we need to be able to listen.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I push most between couples is learn the ability to listen.
Yeah.
To really listen. For one, on one side, be brave enough to speak up.
Yeah.
And on the other side, be loving enough to listen.
Yeah.
In business, in project management and the other side of my life, I use often the words of Stephen Covey. Listen first to understand and then to be understood. Because to be told, most of us listen with while we're thinking about what to respond instead of listening to that person. And so I try to get couples to practice listening to one another. That's one of the exercises that I give to couples who are having problems. One of them has to sit silent for 5 minutes and listen to the other one as they're talking. And
Yeah.
And really listen, not just hear,
Yeah.
not just the want, and we're doing something else in our head. We
Yeah.
need to be attentive and look them in the eye and really listen. And so when it comes to communication, that's the huge thing that I try to share with couples when we're working together, is taking time to really speak and hear one another.
Yeah. So just taking that additional time to listen to what the other person is actually telling them.
Yes. That is key.
Yeah, and I believe that too. I guess to a certain extent, people get that whole thing about hearing and listening confused.
Yes.
Like they get that whole principle, like you could hear someone, but that doesn't mean you're listening to them. Like you actually are listening to what they're actually trying to tell you and understanding that.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
And kind of what I see too, especially with some of my clients, which is that difference, because that's how I guess certain people miss messages. Like a person can tell you something the whole entire time, and you probably hear that one word out of the entire sentence.
Exactly.
It's the message, right?
I mean, think about it. People come together. A couple comes together to have a conversation. They're both bringing a story about whatever that issue is.
Yeah.
One person saying, this is my truth, and the other person is saying, no, this is your truth, and this is what's going on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we spend time looking at each other and running in our head the story that we brought to the discussion. So we need to be able to drop the stories that we're bringing to the discussion and just go ahead and listen and engage with the person that we're talking to. That's bringing those stories to the table are just deadly to relationships.
They are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because your story includes a whole lot of assumptions about that other person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, last question. So, when it comes to developing healthy principles inside the relationship and maintaining a strong, healthy relationship, what do you advise or encourage couples to do to kind of maintain that love, cultivate their relationship? Like what activities, what exercises, what things would you say that would be good for couples?
Okay. Some of the things go all the way back to the beginning, where when you're coming together with someone, to accept a person for who they are. Don't use our imagination to make up who we think they are. Okay. But just be willing to accept the person that they're presenting to you at that time from the beginning, because we have a fantasy. It kills me how people can sit in the room with somebody, but who's in the chair across from them is a fantasy. It's not really who they're dealing with. And so I try to encourage couples to just accept who the person really is from the beginning. And like you say, don't make assumptions. But then I ask for, I think that person, each person in that couple needs to be whole and be present. When I'm counseling with couples, I kind of stop people who talk about the other person completing them.
Yeah.
Because nobody completes us. We need to be two complete people who come into a relationship. So I encourage couples to, work on yourself, make the most of who you are, and then accept your partner for who they are. And then we already talked about communication. That's key. I definitely talk to couples, a large percentage of my working with couples is around communication and forgiveness. The other thing I try to encourage people to do is have fun together. Have a good time. Don't forget about date night. Don't let go of what brought you together. The little things you used to do with one another. Which is why one of the exercises I do with couples is have them go back and remember what they were like at the beginning, and figure out what is it that you liked about this person from the beginning. That sort of, because we lose track of that. So I encourage them to do that. And the final thing I'll share with you is something someone shared with me. Two of my professors when I was in seminary had been together for, I think, 60 years. And they used to kiss every time they got in an elevator, even after up to those 60 years, because they met in an elevator and kissed. Well, no, the first time they kissed was in an elevator. And so one day I asked, the wife, Ella Mitchell, I asked her one day, how did you stay with somebody for 60 years? How does that happen? And she said to me, the secret is don't fall out of love at the same time. Because you're going to have moments where you don't even like that person. But try to hang on where the other person is still hanging on when you want to let go. Be that strong in your relationship during the good times and maintaining it with the having fun together, getting, accepting one another, communicating with one another. Do that as much as you can during the good times and hang on to that, because, it's hard out here trying to find somebody else. I'm so glad I'm not single anymore. I can't tell you, how happy I am about that. Because, getting into a good relationship is a blessing. And I try to remind couples of that. I don't want to get too spiritual with it, but I do believe that our partner is a gift to us, and a gift that we ought to honor and cherish and take care of, and accept how that gift came. When somebody gives you a gift, you don't unwrap it and give it back and say, well, that's not what I thought. I think the same thing with people. We ought to accept people for who they are as the blessing that they are in our lives.